What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another edition of SSPN Live. I'm Jude. That's Ethan. Ethan is back. We are
Mhm.
back, Ethan. And it's kind of fitting because we are officially a week away from the 2024 NBA draft. We've been talking about this for 2 months, dude. We're finally almost here.
I know. Finally, we can stop with the whole guessing game of where the Spurs will go. We'll finally actually know in 7 days' time, which is exciting.
Absolutely. Michael Engel, always in the chat with us. See, he
Mm.
says, Gripe Right team is here.
It's
Ethan,
grip, actually.
Grip
Grip
Right.
right.
Thank you. See, thank you. I should have known without the E, but there you go. That's why I said it so you could correct me. And he says, wins the draft. As we just said, it is a week from today, Michael. And Drew King also in the chat says one more week. And man, Ethan, I've just been thinking about this today, kind of when we're getting ready for this episode. I'm just like, I'm so glad that we're finally here. And I'm glad we can have this discussion today because as much as like all these discussions we've been having have been good and I think they've been beneficial for like my thought process and
Hmm.
kind of learning about prospects and maybe having, thinking one thing initially and then kind of realizing after more study that, maybe you have a little bit of a different perspective now. But with all that being said, there's been so many different things, whether it's pre-draft workouts, the combine, all that type of stuff. Now it's like, this is kind of the most accurate information. I don't know if that's the best word, but I think after, all of the scouts and everybody have kind of gone through the same things that I was alluding to that we've gone through. And
Hmm.
obviously, they have much more resources than us. This is kind of the final thoughts. These are the final big boards and everything coming out. So today I feel like is almost the most concrete discussion we can have about these prospects, even though we've talked about them for 2 months straight.
For sure. It feels like the mock drafts change every week, but finally the dust settling a little bit, like you said, as teams finally evaluate guys for themselves, get them in for private workouts, etc. So it's an exciting time. Maybe some of our predictions will be a little more accurate 1 week out than they were, say, 2 months ago when we were both thinking. I don't even know what we were thinking back in the day because it was so long ago and it feels like it changed, like I said, every single podcast. But here we are with 1 week to go. And if you don't mind, Jude, I want to do a quick
Go
shout
ahead.
out but just to get it out of the way, to Peyton, who is a listener for us pretty much every single episode. Jude, she's in these live. She's listening with her dad, Michael, who's always in the comments. So shout out, Peyton. We appreciate you listening as often as you do. And we appreciate everybody for being in here. A lot of regulars on this channel, guys that have been here since day one. So just a quick appreciative thought going out to everyone.
Absolutely, Ethan. I couldn't have said it better myself. And another shout out, man. Alejandro Morales,
Right on.
Derek White, NBA champion, the
Yes.
chip tooth, everything. Man, but seriously, in all
Mhm.
seriousness, I'm so happy for Derek, dude.
No, me too. Like I think, I mean, the Dallas Mavericks are my second favorite team, so it was kind of like going back and forth the entire time. But at the end of the day, the Spurs weren't in it, so I really didn't care all that much about the outcome. But I'm glad that Derek White, like you said, a guy that was with the Austin Spurs, a guy we drafted and developed into a real solid player, and now he's obviously taking strides on his own with the Boston Celtics. To see him win a championship, um, definitely was, I don't know the word I'm looking for. It made me happy. Let me just put
It
it simply.
Yes, we kind of watched Derek grow into, I mean, we still have the memories from the Denver series when he had 37 and dunked on Paul Millsap to kind of,
Mm,
that
right.
was an
That was
important
a
win
big one.
for us. Yeah, in that series, even though we ended up losing that series, I think that was one of the two games that we ended up winning in that one.
Mm,
It's just, I know we talked about last week about how I may not personally be the biggest Celtics fan,
mm,
but I can't help but be happy for Derek, especially with his story. That's the other thing
yeah.
that I keep going back to. There's been a lot of tweets that I've been seeing kind of since they won the finals of him in the Colorado Springs jersey, before he even made it to Colorado. And,
Mhm.
I mean, there's the picture that's been floated when he was in high school and he looks like he's like, like 8 or something.
Yep.
So just shout out to Derek and his journey and lots of love from a former homegrown Spurs boy, Ethan.
Right. It's a shame that it feels like he had to go to Boston and become a contender for people to appreciate who he is. But Spurs fandom, we knew how special Derek was and the type of things he could bring to any team. So very proud of him.
Absolutely, Ethan. And this draft, we may be looking for the next
Right.
Derek White, if you will. It may not necessarily be him, as we got Derek White at the 29th pick,
Correct.
but we are looking for more guys to be like Derek, be a player that contributes on a championship level team. And Ethan, we're like we just opened this episode with, we're finally here at the week away mark. And I'm
Mhm.
going to ask you this. I'm just going to ask you this on air. Are we planning next week? Are you going to be free at this time?
Yeah, I should
Yeah.
be.
Okay. Well, then we will be doing a live stream just like we did last season. We will not be going the full length of it like I intended to last year and realized very quickly was not reasonable whatsoever. But luckily, the Spurs' first two picks are within the first 10 picks.
Mhm.
So, that probably should be able to be wrapped up within an hour. And also, it's a 2-day draft event.
Right.
So I don't know what we'll be doing with the second round, but maybe there will be some stuff that we'll put out for that, just because it's a 2-day thing and those picks are pretty close together. But we'll see how all of that works out, Ethan. The key here is 4 and 8, 7 days away, Ethan. I'm just going to start this conversation off rip and give it to you. And
Mhm.
here's how I think a good way that we could set it up. So I'm going to ask you at 4, who is just, if everything goes perfect for the Spurs, who's your number one preferred player? You know,
Ugh.
um, I know that's a tough question. That's a tough question. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean and I'm just going to say this not to muddy up the conversation before we get to it, but I'm
Mhm.
not saying necessarily like a Ricochet there, because that's probably, not as likely, even though there are like some slim chances of it happening. But
Mhm.
if everything goes the way that the Spurs want it to, I guess you could throw him in there if you really wanted to.
Mhm.
But then also, if for some reason your favorite player isn't on the board at 4, the player that you're thinking of here, is taken before the Spurs pick, who are just two other names that you would also uh, want at number 4 if that person wasn't available.
I think the perfect situation for the Spurs would be if somehow Rasashe fell to 4. I think I think that's pretty universal. He's a guy that most people have at 1 or 2 in their mock drafts. We've talked about it at length, what he brings to a team. Super athletic, tall, lengthy. Right off the bat, can be a 3-and-D specialist, and in the playoffs has shown the ability to play at a higher level, put the ball on the floor, and I think has a higher ceiling than I think you and I maybe had thought like a month or two ago. I don't want to speak for you, but I thought maybe, especially after speaking with Lou, maybe he was a little
Right.
more limited. But I think what we saw in the playoffs and what everyone's been talking about from his workouts, he's a guy that has a high ceiling that the Spurs would be lucky to pick up. Plus, there's that French connection. If he's gone, which I think he will be at 1 or 2, I think Stefan Castle's the guy that I would like at 4. Um, he's a name in the latest mock drafts that a lot of people have us taking at 4 and or 8. I think personally, I'd rather just take him at 4 if he's available, rather than risk him going at 5, 6, or 7 because of his defensive upside, versatility, his ability to play basically 1 through 3 as well as defend 1 through 3. And I saw an article or a video, I can't remember which, where people are saying the Spurs are kind of resting on their laurels with defense because Victor Wembanyama is so gifted, right? But in this person's eyes, and forgive me for not remembering their name because I want to give them credit, but in their eyes, the Spurs needed to lean into that defensive identity. So
Hmm.
by surrounding Victor with more elite defensive players, which I think he is, I think he's probably the best point of attack defender in the draft. For us to draft him kind of shores up the defensive liability at the point guard position because of Trey Jones. Sure, shooting liability is going to be a question right off the bat, but we saw how he was able to shoot in the combine. He performed well there. And I think you and I and Lou and a lot of other people in the comments have been saying shooting is something that can be taught. We've seen it with Kawhi Leonard. We've seen it, I know not a huge jump, but Jeremy Sohan got a lot better from rookie year to last year. We've seen it consistently throughout the league. Paul George is another name. So I think if we can get him to mid 30% shooting from 3 for a career, and I think that's honestly low potential for him, then he's a guy that can answer a lot of needs for the Spurs and be a long-term solution at that point guard spot and help defend big guards like Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous, guys we'll see down the line.
So there you go. You got Rasashe, as kind of the perfect scenario. And then maybe probably in all likelihood, Stefan Castle would be, somebody at 4 that probably there's going to be more of a likelihood that he would be available in
For sure.
comparison to Rasashin. Now, I do just want to ask you if there's one other name that you'd have to mention it for. If for some reason, like the
Mhm.
Rockets are just like, screw you, San Antonio, we're going to take Stephon at 3.
Right. If Stefan and Rasashe are gone, I think Reed Shepard's another name that I would take it for, because he's a guy for sure would be gone 5, 6, or 7 if we were to let him slip past our fingers. And sure, he's not without his deficiencies, as size, and there's questions about his defense, even though he plays really hard nosed defense, kind of reminiscent of Derek White. But he is a 6'1" frame, but he's very athletic. We saw his vertical in the combine, and he is an elite shooter. And if we're going to talk about defense being the number one need for the Spurs, number two need is by far and away shooting. And there are people that think guys like Castle are not worth drafting because they can't shoot. Reed Shepard, you don't have that issue at all. And he's a very efficient scorer from the field in general as well. And a guy that I think could also offer a solution at that point guard spot. Maybe he doesn't start right away. I don't know, because the Spurs they love Trey Jones and all that stuff. We have the rookie thing. But off the bench, he'd be extremely explosive.
Yeah, and just another thing from what I've been reading, I want to say that Reed Shepard measured at 6'2" at the combine. I could maybe correct myself there, but I know for a fact he's listed at 6'3" in shoes on the court. So he's a little bit bigger than Rob Dillingham, if I'm remembering correctly. If you're looking that up, you
Right.
can.
This says 6'1.8". So basically
Okay.
6'2".
Yeah, so that's where I'm getting that from. And you know how, remember how we did the mock draft where Gavoni was kind of changing up the measurements? Like
Right.
that's basically the same thing as Stephon Castle being listed at 6'7", when
Mhm.
he's like 6'5.8", not in shoes. Then you add an inch with the shoes. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. The point is that I'm coming up with there. He is a little bit bigger than like a Rob Dillingham per se.
Right.
But I do understand the people's concerns there. But also, I mean, when I look back at his defensive tape, I don't really see too many holes there for me personally. Now I understand like people saying that maybe he could get bullied in some matchups in the NBA, but that's for anybody at his size. So
For sure. And there are elite point guards at his size already, all-stars that struggle on defense. So I'm not saying that it's like for sure going to limit his career, but it's just like when you look at him, I think that's really the only potential negative, to be completely honest. He has everything else already.
right. And the thing that makes me feel better about that is the athleticism and the numbers that he showed at the combine. That was my biggest criticism of him initially. I was up here saying I didn't think it was going to translate. I felt like
Mhm.
he wasn't going to be able to do the things that he did because of the athleticism difference in the NBA. But I think what he showed at the combine, and also just with further research from myself, that's who I have as my number one pick at number
Mm,
4. That kind of leads into this, Ethan. And literally the only reason that I have him a little bit above Stephon is just because I feel like there's less holes to poke in his game. And really that just comes down to the shooting.
mm,
Now, what I will say with that, and I've talked to some other people about this, and I even said this, I believe, in the big board video that I made. If Stephon Castle but ends up becoming like a 38% or a 40% three-point shooter, then unequivocally, in my opinion, I can see like his ceiling's higher than Reed's.
mhm,
But if I'm just being completely honest here, and thinking about all the different things, like, okay, Reed can basically, in my opinion at least, other than the size, he
mhm.
can provide everything that Stephon does on top of being a sniper. So, the Spurs' biggest needs. What do you disagree there?
I think they're in completely different classes defensively.
I disagree.
Everything else, I think that in the NBA, his competition is going to be way bigger, way more athletic, even at his size. Um, I don't know if it'll correlate as quickly. I think that their difference. I mean, this is going way overboard for everybody here, but like comparing prime, I don't even want to say this because it's everyone's gonna make fun of me.
You're
Prime
good.
Kawhi Leonard versus like peak Derek White, like both really good defenders.
No, yeah, and even though I said I disagree with you, I get what you're saying right here. I do.
It's like one's a DPOY guy potentially, and one guy's like all defensive second or first team, like a handful of
That's
times in
fair.
his career.
That's
So
fair. I just think Reed is also going to be really good at defense. That's just
yeah.
my personal opinion. Now, with that being said, there's just some things that, like you said, aren't
Mhm.
comparable when one's 6'7" and one's 6'2". You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I do completely like there's just with Stefan's frame, he's just automatically going to have a higher defensive potential, especially in the NBA and with the way that the league is going than Reed.
For sure.
But I think the shooting thing, and on top of him still being, like you said, a potential all NBA defender, that's why I kind of have him there. But again, if he gets the jump shot down, I don't really think there's a comparison when it comes to their ceiling. And even if he doesn't ever become that great of a shooter, I don't think that there's a giant gap between
Mhm.
their ceiling, which is why my second preferred choice at number 4 is Stephon Castle. I really just want either of those guys. And to be honest with you, if the Spurs are on the board or if both of those guys are on the board when the Spurs are there and the Spurs pick Stephon Castle, I'm not going to be mad at all. And I'm going to trust the front office because those
Mhm.
guys know more than I do. And they know the fit, of these guys as well. And really, I think Stephon's more realistic as well, Ethan, because there's been a ton of smoke that I've seen about Reed Shepherd with the Rockets. There is some potential trade talk there where if there's a move made, maybe he would still be on the board. But I don't think the Spurs have had Reed Shepherd in for a workout, but I know they have had Stephon Castle in for a workout where actually he went head to head with Devin Carter, another
Right.
name that we've talked about. And that's a whole nother conversation. I want to get into Devin Carter, but the point I was trying to get at there is that Stephon Castle has had a workout with the Spurs, and I don't know. I'm saying this, maybe I just completely missed it, but I haven't seen anything that Reed has worked out with the Spurs.
Right. I haven't seen anything either. And at 4, if they are both available, I know I put Stephon Castle as my preferred choice, but I mean, the Spurs would have to do their research, obviously. But I think Reed Shepherd has a higher likelihood of going 5, 6, or 7 than Stephon Castle does. So,
Yeah.
like, if they think that there is a high likelihood that we can get Castle at 8 and Reed's available at 4, I think you got to pick Reed at 4.
Yeah, I don't think Stat Castle would be available at 8 though.
You don't think so?
No.
I think maybe the Hornets would take him.
That's where I've seen him going the most.
I don't see
If we don't
Detroit.
take him.
I don't see Detroit.
I agree there.
I don't see Portland because they just have so many guards unless they're debating on blowing
It's
everything
mainly
up.
Charlotte.
Yeah, it's gonna be Charlotte.
But even they have LaMelo and he wants to play point guard.
They do, but they have no defense.
That's very true. And we know he's very versatile. And really,
Mhm.
LaMelo can play the 2. I mean, even though he brings
Yeah,
the ball up. But at 6'7", he's versatile in the lineups.
right, right.
But this is why we're just excited for next week, Ethan, so we can figure it
Mhm.
out.
Yes, finally.
But here's the thing, Ethan. Regardless of our conversation there, both of us are very high on both of those guys at number 4. They're in the mix. And my other name that I'll mention here, I'll just throw out a little bit of a wild card. I was thinking about this. Obviously, if Versachet's there, like that's a given,
Mhm.
But just to throw out another name, because that probably won't be the case, Donovan Clingan, if
Mm,
he slips to number 4. Now, granted, I actually did a mock draft today where he ended up slipping to number 8, and that's where I picked him after I picked Reed Shepherd at number 4.
mm,
But that's just another name that I would throw out there at 4 that I would not be completely opposed to. There's been a lot of smoke that's been coming out of a lot of like he's the only other player that the Hawks have worked out other than Rasachet. The Hawks actually haven't worked out Alex Sarr. I
yeah,
read that today, which is that surprises me, but also we kind of have been hearing the Rasachet smoke a little bit. But the whole reason I bring up, not to interrupt you, but just
very
to
good.
finish the thought here, the whole reason I bring up Donovan Clingan there is the fact that, I mean, there are some connections of them maybe trading down and picking him, but also there has been like a little bit of whispers and stuff that they may like legitimately take him at number 1. I'm not saying that the Spurs should do that, but the whole reason I bring up Donovan Clingan is he's one of the more sure things in the draft. I was talking with a friend about this. I feel like his floor is kind of like a Zubox or a Walker Kessler. And I
Mm,
know at number 4, that's not necessarily going to, get everybody super excited. But in this draft, there, I mean, that being a floor, I mean, that's almost like a starting center. But I think he could even like his ceiling. I was thinking about this today is almost like a prime Drummond like because he's just
mm,
a huge dude. Like pause,
right.
but he's 7'2", like almost I think like 280 pounds, something like that. We've seen what he's done at UConn the past 2 years for them defensively, and we know the Spurs' biggest weakness, Ethan. It's when you take Victor Wembanyama off the floor and he would just do so many things. Like all of the issues that we have whenever we take Wemby off the floor, whenever it comes to defense, rebounding, interior presences, physicality, that is exactly what Donovan Clingan does. So, anyways, I'll stop my rant on Donovan Clingan there. I understand that's not the sexiest pick, but that's another name that I would throw out there potentially if some wackiness happens. But I would not pick him over Reed or Stephon, and I think both of those guys will be there.
Right. That was exactly what I was going to say. If it comes down to it, if it's between Reed, Castle, or Clingan, or any one of those combinations, I would take Reed and Castle first. Um, but I do like everything that you said, and it's all completely valid. Like, he does fix every issue that we had when Victor wasn't on the court last year, and even he could play next to Vic at times. If we wanted to play like an ultra big lineup and not let Victor get beat up down low by an Embiid or a Jokic or an AD, if we wanted to just match that up size for size, that would work. And I've heard also that, according to Atlanta at least, his shooting is a lot better than they expected it to be in his private workouts. I don't know how much validity there is to that, but that's the rumor going around. And I also think Alex Sarr, I heard this, and correct me if you haven't heard this, but I heard that he was actually not, he was refusing to go to Atlanta. Not that Atlanta wasn't working him out. Like, he did not want to go work out for them, which I found interesting.
I did not see. Sorry, I thought I got a phone call for a second, so I was checking that to see who it was.
You're good.
Ask me that question one more time. It threw me
I
off a
said,
little bit.
I saw that.
Never mind. You're good. I heard what I'm remembering now. Alex Sarr and the Wizards, and Alex Sarr not going to Atlanta. I have not heard anything about that, but that would probably explain that. And also on the Donovan Clingan shooting thing, I have also heard that. I'm not holding my breath on that. I think
That's
that's
weird.
going to be like a very long term thing if that ever happens. Like, I don't think that's going to be. And the other thing is, like, what's the context of these private workouts? Like, is he just shooting open jumpers? Like,
True.
you know what I mean? I think there was one jumper that I saw on his highlights, and it was a wide open catch and shoot three. I'm not saying he can't do that, but that's not something I'm gonna bet on. I actually had a conversation with one of my friends today about this, and he put it as like, I'm not gonna hold my breath on that, and I think that's a good way to put it. But something to keep an eye on. I've been seeing that too.
That all that being said, if he's available at 8, which I don't imagine that he would fall to
Right.
8, but if he is there at 8, I don't have a problem taking him, because like you said, he shores up the backup center position. I think he could play next to Victor Wembanyama against some bigger lineups in the West, and fix a lot of the issues we had with Zach last year.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said. And, Wemby working out with Jamal Charles, or
Right,
oh my God,
Jamal
Jamal
Craw
Charles.
he's working on hitting
Jamal
the A gap.
Crawford. Oh my goodness. Shout out to the Chiefs in Texas.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Um, that's so funny. I just said Jamal Charles because I'm like picturing the Instagram photo with Jamal Crawford. And then
Uh-huh.
also, this is like, you remember during All-Star weekend when they said they were going to work together in the interview?
Right, yeah.
So this is that coming to fruition. Anyways, the reason I bring that up, I don't think this is going to be a full-time thing. I think I'm still sticking to the tape and what we saw this year. I do think there will be more potential down the line because the Spurs will be better. But, maybe if we get Clingan, there could be we could play Wemby at the 4 next to him.
Mm.
I'm not going to go down that entire road again. But, I mean, if he's working on moves from Jamal, that's a perimeter skill set. You know what I'm saying?
For sure, for sure.
And I think he'll only get more fluid and not to say clumsy, but he won't be like a baby gazelle as much anymore as he continues into the rest of his career with his ball handling. You know what I'm saying?
More balance, more coordination, for sure, for sure.
There you go, Ethan. Well, let's move on to number 8. Who is your number 1 preferred pick at number 8 in like a realistic scenario? And then who are 2 other names that you'd also consider if that player's off the board?
This one is a little more challenging because I feel like it could really go any direction here. Because the guys between like 5 and 13 constantly move up and down. So it's like shooting into an empty cavern kind of to see who would be available here. But um, I think I think I go Cody Williams, Jude. I like his versatility. Again, it immediately addresses defense, which for me, I said at the very beginning of all of these draft, discussions is my first need the Spurs should address is defense, 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 and then we can worry about shooting later. That's just my personal opinion, but our defense was so atrocious, and we have a lot of guys that aren't physically gifted like naturally at that position. So Cody Williams is that. Sure, he's extremely raw. He's a project guy, but taking a Stephon Castle or a Reed Shepard at 4, because both of those guys are NBA
Yes.
ready, allows us to take a little bit more time with this second pick. And if Cody Williams works out, if he is any kind of resemblance of his brother who plays for Oklahoma City, then he immediately replaces Mr. Champagny as our starting small forward. And if we were to have an offensive lineup of Castle, Devin Vassell, Cody Williams, Jeremy Sohan, Victor Wembanyama, that is an elite defensive core. And even if you want to take Castle out and put Reed Shepard in there, still elite defensive core. And that's immediately addressed. Sure, shooting is a concern, as always, with some of these guys that are extremely raw like this. But I think his shot is not broken. It is fluid. It's just a little bit slow. He can speed that release up, more reps. That's something that I'm not concerned with at all. Because like there's some guys with jump shots, it's like sure it needs a little tweaking. I would put Jeremy in that conversation. Like we knew he wasn't going to be a shooter
Mhm.
right off the bat, and nor is he going to be a sniper in his career. But he can be capable. I think Cody Williams has the tools and the jump shot to become a sniper if he puts the work in. Obviously, that's a big caveat, but I think he has the character and somebody that can definitely get to that point.
Yes. I don't want to interrupt you
You're
before
good.
you go into your next guys, but I just want to touch on a couple things about Cody Williams. Because
Please.
remember a while back, we kind of talked about his shooting conundrum, if you will. I talked about that with Lou. I had heard that on like the Low Post or some NBA draft podcast, excuse me, whether it was the Ringer or ESPN or whoever.
Mhm,
Um, but actually, he did an interview with Kevin O'Connor recently,
mhm,
just kind of, and they asked him about that. And here's the thing, like he did shoot 40+%. I think it was like 41%.
mhm.
Um, his attempts were like 1.8, so it wasn't that many.
He only
But
shot
the
wide open, yeah.
Right, but the other thing is that teams were pressuring him a lot too. So he
True.
didn't get to take like it's like they knew he had a good jump shot. They game planned that in that caused him to, drive inside a little bit more. He talked about that with Kevin O'Connor. The other thing is they had guys like KJ Simpson, Tristan Da Silva on that team too, who are also solid shooters. So they were like, we're gonna make these guys beat us, even though they ended up also being good shooters before we let Cody Williams do it. So there was a lot of game plan stuff that tied in to him not taking as many shots. He feels like he can, prove that 40% is not a fluke, basically, on more attempts. And the other thing that I've been hearing is in a lot of his workouts, I believe it was in his Lakers workout specifically. Now, I don't
Mhm.
know if the Lakers are even going to be, I don't think they're going to have a chance to pick him. But during his Lakers workout in Los Angeles, he really impressed with his shooting ability off the dribble, and
Mhm.
just catch and shoot situations. It's the point I'm trying to get at here is it seems like as time has progressed, his shooting to me at least has only seemed to be less of a concern.
For sure, for sure. And I don't know what podcast you listen to, but I heard one as well where he was told not to shoot by his
Yes.
coach, but, like, he can shoot. Like, for some reason,
That
that
was
was,
a
like
game plan thing. Yeah.
correct. So, that tells me, again, he's a winner, because he's willing to do whatever it takes to do whatever his coach wants him to do to win. I don't actually know what Colorado's record was, so that could have been a complete lie, but
They
regardless.
had a pretty decent season. They
Okay,
have 3 NBA guys, I'm pretty
good,
sure.
good, thank God. Um, just to name my other 2 guys real quick that if Cody Williams is not available at 8, I go back and forth for my next 2 options. I really could go either way. It's between Tejan Salon, forgive me if I said his first name wrong, I always get it wrong. Tejan Salon, and Dalton Connect. For Dalton Connect, I think the opportunity is pretty obvious. He's an older guy, immediately NBA ready. He's got a good frame, 6'5", long. He'll be a capable defender right off the bat. He's not going to be a crazy defender like Stephon Castle, but he can stay in front of guys, probably a little bit better than Julian Champagny can at this point. And you can either start him and he can be a 3-and-D shooter, or you can put him off the bench and just let him be an absolute bucket because he's a bucket getter for Tennessee. He can score at all 3 levels, and he can help Keldon Johnson off the bench. And then Tejan Salon, another really raw prospect, but 6'9". He could play 4 or 3, maybe even a small ball 5. I'm not really sure, but he's the guy that you're super high on. And honestly, the way you explain his game is what keeps me so high on him. But he's incredibly raw, extremely versatile, athletic, eats up space, makes the right play, and he's French. Um, so might as well, like I said, I'm open to maybe making this number 8 pick a project player, and this I think is what that would be.
The sentiment that you just said at the end there is kind of exactly how I feel about it, number 8, because I think, like as we just discussed, regardless of how number 4 turns out, it's going to be Reed or it's going to
Mhm.
be Stephon. Those guys are going to be NBA ready coming in. So that kind of allows you, kind of like you and you, I, and Lou talked about,
Mhm.
how we can kind of play off the picks depending on,
Right.
how it ends up unfolding. Um, and you were right on the money there, Ethan. I have the same 3 players. I just have them in a different order.
I
No,
figured.
my number 8 is Tijan Salon.
Mm,
Um, he's the youngest out of all 3 of those guys. Actually,
true.
the youngest player that it could be a potential first round prospect, not the youngest player in the draft, just the youngest potential prospect listed as a first round guy. Um, and his upside. That's really what it comes down to. Honestly, it all comes down to his frame, which ties into his upside, the
Mhm.
flashes he's shown, and his shooting ability. The shooting ability is the thing. Yes, the percentage isn't crazy. I think it's like 34%. But if you go watch his highlights, you're going to see a bunch of catch and shoot jumpers, way
Mhm.
more than you expect. That's how it went for me. And honestly, a lot of them from like, I don't know the exact feet range to call it, but like near logo threes where he's just like pulling up. And I don't want to exaggerate that too much. That's why I said the key word is near logo threes. I'm just saying he has some range. It's not like, he's not going to be able to shoot if he's not like, an inch from the 3-point line.
Mm.
Um, so when you come in with shooting potential and catch and shoot potential specifically, to be a potential 3, or as we've talked about, Ethan, on this channel, I kind of see him, if he were to be picked by the Spurs, I see him as more of a 4, just
Mhm.
because of the openness of that roster spot, as well as CD Sissoko potentially coming in and taking some minutes at the 3. And maybe I don't know if they have any prior relations, both being from France. Maybe they do. We know him and Wemby do, obviously, because of their sisters. But Tijan, man, I I don't want to repeat myself from everything that I've said in the prospect breakdown that we've already done. Y'all can go
Uh-huh.
check that out. But I think the shooting ability, the defensive mobility and potential there, the flashes that he's shown driving to the rim because of his size and frame, being able to finish through contact. I think everything inside the arc has potential to be developed on top of the frame. And the other thing that stands out to me that gives me confidence with that, Ethan, and I know we've already talked about this, but I'm going to say it again, is his dribble. When I watch his dribble, he's not dribbling up to his chest. I'm not saying he's going to be crossing people over or anything like that, but I think that honestly, I mean, it's the French league. But from what I see, like it almost feels like already coming into the league, he's got a tighter dribble than a Jeremy Sohan.
Mm.
Um,
I would
and
agree.
really, I'm not, that's not to try to make some point on his playmaking ability. I'm just saying when he can blow past people, or drive around guys, put his shoulder into them, it's not like he's just going to lose the ball and it's going to be an automatic turnover.
Mm.
There's going to be adjustments coming into the league. He's a very raw player. He's definitely a prospect, but I just really have faith that with the comments I've heard about him from Wemby, the seamless kind of positional fit on our roster and the shooting ability, I feel like we can develop the defense, even though that's not even in a bad place to start with. And we can develop all of the stuff, inside the arc. And
Mhm.
really, when we think about his role on the team, Ethan, are we really going to be demanding Tijan Salon, especially if we draft a Reed Shepard or a Stephon Castle? Are we really going to be demanding him to put the ball on the floor? Or is he going to be more of a catch and shoot threat in the first place? So I think you kind of see my thought process there on the things of why he's so appealing. I think he has the highest ceiling. Does he reach that ceiling? I don't know. There I can
Mm.
definitely see a world where maybe Cody Williams, ends up being a better player than him. More of
Mhm.
a having a bigger role on a team than him. But maybe not. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But with how young he is and all the stuff that I just mentioned, That's why I have him over Cody Williams and Dalton Connect. But those are also my other two choices. Everything you said about Cody Williams, I completely agree with. We talked about the shooting ability. Um, I see the Kawhi comparisons there. It's not just the cornrows, like it's in his play style as well.
Mm,
So I see the appeal there 100%. And I think honestly, he's coming into the league with a little bit more of a developed offensive game than Kawhi. Now, saying he's going to be Kawhi for sure is a stretch at this point. But I'm just saying I see the comparisons there for sure. And then Dalton Connect, the only thing that I want to mention that you didn't is another thing that people forget about him, SEC Player of the Year in his first year in the SEC, just
mm,
came in and took over. I know he's older, but that's also, if you want to turn that into a pro and kind of look at this through an optimistic lens, that's a way of, drafting while simultaneously accelerating the timeline. But more importantly, he's going to provide shooting. He's going to be an upgrade at the three over Julian Champagny. And
mm.
for all of the defensive things that people can say about him, I think there's no better place than San Antonio for him to come develop that. But the other thing that's key here too, Ethan, is this draft is we're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, I think one of three of these guys are going to be here at this point, but I have seen some stuff where the Trailblazers have interest in Tijon. So maybe they swipe him up at number 7 right before us, and that takes that pick away. I've seen that not just recently, but I saw that like a month ago too. So that's something to keep an eye on with Tijon. He's kind of in that Bilal territory, where at the end of the draft process, he's kind of jumping into the top 10. So it might not just be the Spurs that have their eye on him, but at the end of the day, Ethan, we have the same 3 guys.
Right, right. It's just the order in which we are high on them that's different. And I completely agree with everything that you said. At the end of the day, I wouldn't be mad if we took Tijon over Cody Williams or Tijon over Dalton Connect. It really doesn't matter as long as we get one of those guys in my eyes.
Yeah, same thing here for me.
It's something I didn't actually realize until just now. And this isn't an indictment on either of them, or this isn't an indictment on one, and it's not a necessarily like he's better for the other guy. But Cody Williams is 6'6" and with a 7'1" wingspan, and Tijon is 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. So 3 inches shorter, but the same exact wingspan.
That's pretty crazy. And I've been seeing with shoes on, I think that Cody will probably be 6'7" on the floor.
Probably, probably.
These measurements are so like I wish that we could just have a concrete thing.
I
I'm not
would.
even dude because I saw like on another video like people were commenting like Julian Champagny's draft combine measurements was 6'6.185. Why are you calling him 6'9"? Because the San Antonio Spurs training camp roster from this year called him 6'9". Like, and the thing is they're not wrong either, because I'm sure that was his combine measurement, but it's just like, can we get some consistency?
He probably grew too. If we're
That right,
honest.
right, and I'm sure that's the case. But it's just like that's me and Ethan at the beginning of the year. We get a Spurs training camp roster, and it's funny because in years past, Keldon Johnson has been listed at 6'6". This year, he was listed at 6'5". I don't know where the changes come from, but usually we just try to go off the training camp roster at the beginning of the year, and
Mm.
that's what we roll with. Charles Bassey at some places is listed at 6'9". On the Spurs training camp roster, he's listed at 6'11". So it's like, I don't
Mm.
even know, but we just try to go from the horse's mouth.
Right, right, right. Well said, Jude. Thank you.
I just wanted, because that is like a legit conversation. You know what I mean?
No, for sure.
Anyways, I see that a lot. But that pretty much wraps up our picks that we would take and our preferences there at 4 and 8, Ethan. So you ready to do a little mock draft?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. Let me get that pulled up. And I'm gonna spoil something here for you, Ethan. We are going to do a full one, but it is not going to take very long at all.
Okay, perfect.
And here's one that I did earlier. You guys are seeing this right in front of on the screen here. I didn't even realize I still had this up. This is spoiling things. I'm frustrated with myself right now, Ethan. But we'll get to it later. So as you guys can see here, we've got some options here. We're on Fanspo, and Ethan, you can see down there at the bottom that there's a couple different ways that we can do this. You can click team need, chaos. You can just do the lottery or the first round. You can do the whole draft if you want to. But so here's this thing here. I think we should use the ESPN draft consensus, or not consensus, not the Fanspo consensus. And the reason that I say that is because as much as I really like the consensus more, because I think it gives a bigger idea than just Jonathan Givony, the consensus has like Nikola Topic. I've been doing a couple mock drafts recently. They have Nikola Topic, like he goes like 3 or 4, and that's just, I don't think that's going to happen with the injury. So that's why I think we should use the ESPN one here, Ethan. Does that make sense?
Understood. Let's do it.
Alrighty. So here we go. Alex Sarr goes number 1.
Mm.
Donovan Clingan goes number 2, and Risha Shea goes number 3, Ethan.
Ooh.
So, see, I don't even know if that's going to happen, but that's why this mock draft simulator is a little fun, because as much as those 3 going 1 through 3 aren't crazy, it wasn't the order you expected.
Mm.
But this kind of leads into the conversation that we just had, Ethan.
It does.
And here's the thing. I'm going to go with Stephon with you.
Okay.
I'm just going to agree with you. And it's kind of funny because I said I disagree, but then when you just put it in the way that you did, where you're like, hey, like I'm like Reed Shepherd could be a second or first team defender, but the frame is just completely different. And the promise that we have seen from the star drill at the combine. And here's the other thing, Ethan, it's our division. We need somebody to guard. As much as I think Reed Shepherd would do a good job, it just wouldn't be the same as having someone with Stephon's frame on a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander or a Luka Doncic, a Ja Morant, even for the sake of talking about it.
100%. And I'll just to put it in context, Luka Doncic, he played very well when defended against Derek White and Drew Holiday. But Jaylen Brown gave him a lot of trouble. And I think that's the difference between the two players.
As much as I love Reed, I mean, that's why it's so funny, because I said I disagreed, and then you said that, and I was like, I don't disagree with that, actually. Because it's just, I mean, it's an athletic. Reed definitely has a lot of athleticism that he showed, but still, the frame thing is just different. And, this kind of goes back, it's funny, it goes back to Lou in the sense that he feels like we should sprint to the podium, and he has him at his number 1 player. I think a lot of that, sticks in my mind. And I did watch some more Stephon Castle highlights, or not more. I went and rewatched just because it had been a while since I watched him. And there's just, again, there's a little bit of that. I don't want to exaggerate the athleticism differences because we saw what Reed did at the combine again, but the frame, it's just different. And the example that you just gave is also so key.
Appreciate it, Jude. Thank you.
No problem. Reed Shepherd goes number 5. Rob Dillingham goes number 6. And Matas Buzelis goes number 7. So all 3 of our guys that we just talked about, Ethan, are still on the board. I'm just going to – I picked the last one, so I'm gonna let you pick this one.
Do I need to be the team player here? You picked my guy.
No.
Dang.
Because I actually agreed. I agreed with what I said. You know what I'm saying? Like, that wasn't just to make you happy. Like, when I think about our division, I'm rolling with that because it's just going to be more important. And we're going to get shooting at this pick is the other thing. Like, regardless of who we pick.
Right. I'm going to take Cody Williams, and I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Without repeating everything that I had already previously said about his game. We have Jeremy Sohan at our power forward. He's the future power forward, right? We've drafted Devin Vassell as our shooting guard. We just drafted our point guard, and we have drafted our center, Victor Wembanyama. We have yet to draft our small forward of the future. And I think Tijon has potential at the 3, but I think he's more natural of a 4, especially in our system, in the modern NBA. So I'm going to take Cody Williams.
I'm not mad at this at all, and this is why when we just talked about it, Ethan, I said I wouldn't be mad if the Spurs picked a Cody Williams over a Tijon, and you were vice versa. The other thing is, I think he's more naturally of a 3 than Tijon, and when you put it that way roster-wise, I totally see what you're saying. And on top of that, the wingspan as well that you mentioned, that's another key detail.
I mean, his brother plays power forward for the Oklahoma City Thunder, so I mean, he can go back and forth too, probably.
Right, and he's shorter than Cody Williams.
Correct.
But the last thing that I was going to say, as much as I really like the French league, and I think that it's proving with all the prospects and what Victor did last year that it is a league that can produce NBA talent and NBA ready talent.
Mm.
Cody Williams, as much as he is also a project, I think he's a little bit more of a sure thing than Tijon. And I also think that what we saw from him, in the Pac-12 as well, it's more proven to translate.
Couldn't agree more.
A little bit of a less risky pick is how I would put it. Now it gets fun, Ethan, but this is why I wanted to do the rest of this draft, because I have a second round player for you, Ethan, and he's been here every single time when our next pick comes up. Is it not loading anymore? Okay, I have to be on the page. Sorry, I was trying to come back to the restream page so I could see your face, but I have to be on here for it to load. But this next second round pick that we make here, Ethan, as we watch all of these players go off the board, he's somebody that I have kind of been convinced now, I want the Spurs to pick him. And that's the first player in the second round that's happened to me in the entire draft. I made the little clip, and we talked about the second round in the podcast I did last Friday, I believe, where I went over Jonathan Gavoni's best fits next to Wemby. But with all of that being said, this was the first time I had really kind of okay, this second round player catches my eye, and he's on the board, Ethan. Can I pick him?
You may.
It was kind of spoiled earlier. Pacome Dadier, okay? A French 6'9". He's really a forward, but he has played a lot of the two, but he's 6'9", okay?
Okay.
The reason he's played the two a lot, so first of all, from the German league. Let me actually just skip this for a second. Are you on the Ringers draft page now? Did that pop up?
Yes.
Okay. Here is his breakdown from Kevin O'Connor. And as you can see, he actually has him listed as 26 on his big board, Ethan. So I could sit here and talk about him and all that stuff, but I'm just going to read this to kind of give y'all an even better idea. Skilled teenage Frenchman who displays raw go-to scoring upside, pull-up threat, off-ball mover, shades of former Spur and 2007 NBA champion Michael Finley. But let's read his pluses. Skilled shooter off the dribble. He's comfortable pulling up from mid-range, whether it's stopping on a dime or stepping back. If he extends his range, he could become a major scoring machine. Let me stop right here. Forgot to mention this. He played in the German league. So even though he's from France, well, this says LNB Pro B. So that is not Pro A. So maybe when I looked that up, it was in the German league. Maybe I could just have that wrong. But I think that regardless, it's still not Pro A. That's the league that Rasache and Victor and Tijon played in. So it's not the same league. It's not the same French league. Even if it is in the French league, it's the B league. It's not the A league. But anyways, right. Besides the point, I really thought it was the German league. I don't know why. Because there's Juan Nunez, who's another guy that just got picked before this. He's a Spanish point guard. He's also on this team. Anyways, got that wrong. Back to this. Good shooting potential off the catch. He isn't yet a knockdown guy, but has smooth form and soft touch on free throws and layups. They say he's not a knockdown guy, and he is at 35% on 2.3 attempts per game. But what I will say, Ethan, from what I have watched, he's definitely got he's got the potential to be there. He can definitely be a knockdown guy in the future. Decisive attacker off the dribble with a good first step and the burst to turn the corner. He's capable of finishing comfortably using either hand with touch layups or finishing with power when he has room to take off. I saw a lot of that. Displays good vision for finding his teammates. His IQ shows when moving without the ball. He has a feel for getting himself open using relocations around the perimeter and cuts to the rim. He'll pounce on mistakes made by defenders. Long-armed wing with a strong, wide frame and the upside to defend multiple positions as he matures physically. The minuses, too sloppy with the ball, makes inaccurate passes, telegraphs the ball to teammates, and lacks awareness when defenders are lurking nearby as he handles. So that is your introduction there. He is 6'7.8", so basically 6'8". They have him at 6'9", probably because of shoes. A 6'9" wingspan, not the craziest wingspan, but you notice when the wingspans are smaller, at least on 2K, this is how it works, Ethan. Shooting ability goes up. So we're seeing that with him, and he will be 19, I believe, on draft night since it says 18.9. But I went and watched a little bit of his tape after I found him, like after he kept popping up here, and I'm like, who's this French guy? Because he's French. But then I see he's 6'9" too. I'm like, and he
Mm,
can shoot. And then you just saw even Kevin O'Connor's out here having him as a potential, listed, even though in most of the mocks he's a second round guy. He has him at number 26. But the more important thing is also said versatile, can defend multiple positions. Now, when I say that, this is a second round pick. Like
mhm,
I'm saying all of this, he's going to be like very raw. This is, probably another CD Sissoko type season where you're in the G League for almost all of the year. But here's the thing, Ethan, at 6'9", and because he has played, they kind of played him at the 2 and the 3 mostly on his team from what I watched. And that's because of his shooting ability. With his frame, he could be more of a 3-4 for us, or be like the third string 4, for example. Maybe we want to bring back Mamu. We'll have to see what happens with that. Um, but the other thing is there, Ethan, like we know how open that 4 position is, but also we need a third string. If that doesn't translate, we need a third string 2 also that
mm.
he could slide in right behind there. Um, but anyways, I could go on and on, but I think this, I mean, like every mock I've did today, he's been available. There's the French connections, the shooting ability, and the frame, kind of eerily similar to Tijon. Obviously, he's much more thin than Tijon, but again, the frame and the shooting ability, I I feel like the Spurs can work on a lot of the other stuff, especially with the shades of defensive potential as well. They didn't write down like terrible defender. You know what I mean? So
For sure. Look, I haven't done any research on any second round picks, to be completely frank and honest with you, because it's a second round pick, and
right,
usually I don't have the bandwidth to do that. But everything that you just said, everything that I'm reading right here on the Kevin O'Connor mock draft, I like him. I mean, he's versatile, tall, lengthy, can shoot. The biggest plus I see is that he can move well with off the ball without the ball. Um, and something I'm just now realizing is we have not drafted a guy since Devin Vassell who's good at that. Malachi needs the ball. Blake
right.
needs the ball. Jeremy needs the ball. Keldon was never an off-ball mover. I think that's what he needs to get better at. So yeah, sure, why not? And like you said, he'll be in the G League most of the time, but if he can develop that skill as an off-ball mover and shooter, it addresses that need.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to say too is that last year the Spurs had 2 second round picks and traded one of them.
True.
And they traded actually the first one that they had because they had intel that CD would be there, when they selected with the other one. So I could definitely see that being a possibility. But Ethan, I'm not mad if we end up picking this guy and he ends up, because of his positional versatility with his size. I wouldn't be mad if he ends up being our third string, you know, 2, or even if you want to put him at the 3, you think that's more natural. Maybe Keldon's going to be the small ball 4 off the bench. I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. But
Mhm.
long term, he could potentially, if you want to slot him in at uh, the last, what's the word? The third string 4. That's what I
Mhm.
was also saying. He could be the third string 2 or 4, even though I would say he's more of a 2 and a 3 right now. But put some muscle on, you never know with being 6'9". And okay, saucy takes. Our boy Lou, he says ratio farm. He plays in the German league.
Mm.
So I must have got that from somewhere, even though, and then when it said France, that must have just been his country. But when I saw LNB Pro B, I was like, that's the French league, LNB. But they probably play in Germany. So that's why I called it the German league. I'm glad it wasn't just me.
You're good. You're good.
And another thing, he says, Daddy, Daddy A. Lou says Dadier is a very good cutter. So there
Mm.
we go. Some other stuff that he has on his game. But again, Ethan, I mean, I just kind of found this guy out like really like in the past couple days doing mock drafts. I have not really looked too much into the second round prospects as well, but it seems like he's going to be available. And with the French connection and again, shooting ability and versatility, I would be down with it.
No question. Me as well.
Okay, and here we go with the last one. This one's just going to be fun.
I think I know where you're going with this.
No, I'm not. I know what you're thinking, but I'm actually not going to go with it.
Okay.
It's Bronny, but I'm not going with Bronny. We just knew what that was going to be. Okay, Isan Almansa that he just popped up on the screen.
Mhm.
Just another thing, he actually pulled out of the draft. Um,
Mm.
because basically, I mean, it was how G League Ignite went. His stock wasn't where he wanted it to be. I honestly think it's a good move for him because he's still 18, so he could
Mhm.
play another year of pro ball, develop, kind of raise his stock more. He'll be more ready for the NBA, and then he can come into the draft next year. I just saw that, wanted to notice that. But Ethan, do you want to go with this pick here?
I would love to, and
Okay.
I'm actually gonna take Jabal Shed.
There you go, Ethan. That's a great pick. I don't want to talk over you. There's another one there,
Mhm.
KJ Simpson. That's who I've been picking at this pick a lot.
Mm.
Uh, but Jamal Shed has not been available at this pick any of the times that I have picked KJ Simpson. And I would also pick Jamal Shed over KJ Simpson. But why did you pick him, Ethan?
Well, in a couple of the mock drafts that I have looked at the second round, he's been a guy that kind of goes around our 35th pick. So for him to fall all the way down to 48 in the situation, obviously he's a guy that has the potential to be in the earlier of the second round. But also, we just took, I think, uh, a big point guard and then two forwards. So this addresses the field general, smaller point guard guy or floor general, excuse me, guy with a lot of hustle. He can score at the rim. He averaged 6 assists in college. I'm looking here on this thing. His shades of is TJ McConnell. And TJ McConnell, I don't know if you remember this, Jude, is a guy that I wanted to sign like 4 years
Yes.
ago when we very first started this channel, and we never did. But that's a guy that was very useful for the Indiana Pacers in situations during the season, and obviously played very well in the playoffs. So to bring him in to just kind of be the third string or even fourth string at this point guard behind Trey Jones, especially with Trey Jones being on an expiring contract, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only reason I brought up KJ Simpson was to give you a reason why I hadn't picked Jamal Shed here. And like you said, a lot of places have maybe had him picking him at around 35 or him getting picked around that area, not just with our pick. But man, I mean, he was such a, I mean, as much as he's 22, first of all, if we do go with all four of our picks, which I don't think we will, but if we do, this last pick is going to probably most likely be a two-way, unless
Yeah,
we
for
wanted
sure.
to sign Pacome Dadier to one instead. Um, but I mean, Jamal is he's a winner. He's been a part of that Houston culture, defensive minded, 12-6. You know, it's not the crazy stats, but that's why Houston's as good as they are. I mean, there
Hmm.
are so many in Houston's program, Ethan, there are so many Spursian like culture traits
For sure.
that they build. I mean, and I don't want to go off on a whole tangent here, but one of the first podcasts or the first podcast that I did with the other podcast that I produce, it's called Let's Talk Basketball with Dan Miller. We had Kellen Sampson, who's Kelvin Sampson's son, an
Mm.
assistant coach at Houston on. And when you go listen to that, you can learn a ton about Houston's culture. And when I was listening to that, and that's almost like 3 years ago at this point, when that was literally our first episode we ever did. I just remember listening back to that and being like, man, there's so many like Spursian types things here. And I'm like, and that explains why Houston has been as good as they have for so long. And the last thing I'll say, there is a video that has been floated around for a long time. I forget the exact context, but I'm pretty sure it was like after Houston lost, like a big game. I could be
Mhm.
wrong about that, but regardless, there is a video of Jamal Shed picking up trash, like a knocked over trash can, and like picking it all up and putting the trash away before he goes to the locker room. And if that isn't the most Spurs thing I've ever seen, on top of his on court traits, yeah, I would definitely pick him at 48.
Couldn't agree more. I didn't even realize he was like a defensive minded guy, to be completely honest with you. So shout out you and Lou in the comments for pointing that out. And yeah, if this is how the Spurs draft night ends up looking, um, I'm gonna go to bed in such complete peace, Jude, because this answers literally every single one of our needs. Maybe we would have liked to have gotten one just elite shooter, but it sounds like Daddy A is going to be that in your eyes, and I think Cody Williams has that potential as well.
Yeah, and Ethan, I like the uniqueness of this draft. I
For sure.
completely agree with everything you said, just because it mixed as much as the second round was the second round. It kind of mixed both of our perspectives here.
Mm,
Um, with all of this being said, Ethan, the last thing that I will say here as we close out this literal final draft discussion, before next week at least, is that there's going to be the trades.
mm,
We There could potentially be a ton of trades in this draft just with the uncertainty with everything. Maybe, that there's some chaos that happens and somebody wants to trade out. But it seems like a lot of that's going to happen on draft night. But I think the nature of the draft again just kind of adds to that being a potential.
mm. No, absolutely. I think the Atlanta number one pick, especially with how Alex R has been unable to get there for a workout, according to sources. Saw that in the comments earlier. Thank you, whoever said that. Um, that has the potential, or at least there's rumors that the Spurs are going to move up to one. There's rumors that Houston's going to move down from three. So, agreed. There's going to be a lot of draft night drama, probably.
And that will affect a lot of this. So as much as
Hmm.
this may seem like a smooth thing, it could be way different than we
Hmm.
even with this being a little different, it could be way different than that. That was the point I was trying to get to.
For sure.
But Ethan, we're going to wrap this episode up with one more discussion, and that is Keldon Johnson.
Mm.
It feels like even before this season, Ethan, even last year, the year before, Keldon has just been a hot topic for Spurs fans. And we've talked about this, I believe, even in the last episode we did together. You kind of mentioned how we're probably, a lot higher on him than maybe a lot of other Spurs fans. But with that being said, that doesn't mean that we're trying to sit here and say that he's, a perfect, there's nothing to criticize at all. Like we're not trying to sit here and say that either. But I think we do our best to kind of come from a balanced perspective and, look at the things that he does do well, the strengths that he does have. And with all of that being said, Ethan, we're just going to kind of discuss that a little bit. And I texted with you about this earlier this week, and I said I'm kind of going to pose a question to you.
Okay.
And then kind of you can go offensively and defensively off of this. I already have my answers and everything written down, so I'm just going to dish the question to you. What can KJ improve on to unlock the things he does well?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great way to frame that. Um, Offensively, I think he needs to go to the Marco Bellinelli school of moving without the basketball, because we put him in that six-man role, and that kind of allowed him to play to his strengths, which is ball in hand, taking guys off the dribble, and either getting to the cup or shooting a three. He doesn't have a lot in the in-between game. We saw glimpses of some post-ups, nothing crazy every once in a while. But if he can get better at moving without the ball, that opens up his ability to play alongside Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama and the rest of the starting lineup, because he's not going to have the ball in his hands that often. And in that lineup right now, he's basically standing in a corner or, working his way up from a corner to the wing. And when he gets the ball, it's just sprint to the basket as hard as you can. Right. That's really his go-to move when he's moving without the basketball. So if he can get some moves, cutting baseline, moving off of screens, becoming a Reggie Miller type player where he doesn't need the ball to get open, I think that will allow him to take guys off the dribble more often, which is his biggest strength.
Yeah. And then defensively, you want to go for that?
Defensively, I think he kind of is who he is defensively. I think for him, it comes down to kind of what everyone was talking about with Luka Doncic in the playoffs, and that's just don't give up open drives. Just fight to get over screens, get in front of guys. I know you're going to get beat physically. You're not as tall as some of the guys you're defending, so they're going to shoot over you at times, and you're not as quick laterally as some of these dudes that are able to take you off the dribble. But if you could just stay in front of them for as long as you possibly can and make that an effort focus, and I think it was a focus for him last year. I think that there was just a frustration element to everything,
There
plus
was
him
so
moving to
much going
the
on
bench.
too.
Yeah, there was big changes on the roster and in the rotation that maybe it took that out of his head. But if he can refocus that and make that an emphasis for himself coming into the season, I think that we'll see a positive turn for him, because he really doesn't have to stay in front of him for long. Just give Wemby time to come help is really what we're asking. But if he's going to give up a wide open drive, then of course people are going to be yelling at him in the comments and on social media.
Right. Um, I'll just answer that question just like you, Ethan. A lot of it will be similar. But the best way that I can describe it, and this is kind of saying what you're saying, just in a different way,
Hmm.
uh, be a more connective piece
Mm.
offensively and defensively. You talked about him being a better off ball player. That ties into being a better connective piece offensively. And then defensively, like you said, I mean, well, the one thing I guess I would say a little bit more connection wise defensively is just rotations and awareness off the ball. Because there are times where he's been caught sleeping on backdoors. That's
Mm.
something that still stands out to me a little bit. I will say at times though this season I did notice, him getting in a stance and staying in front of guys more. Like you said though, I agree with everything you said also. That's still an area that can have improvement. But just some of the stuffs I had written down, again, rotations, awareness off the ball. And there's room for growth on the ball too, on blow bys. Again, kind of just what we said. And then offensively, looking to pass a little bit more, like maybe on your drives, when you are drawing attention, driving inside, like, and a lot of that ties into, you're going to have to drill that because
Mhm.
in those situations, you're not going to be, Keldon's not like a Chris Paul, and I say that with all the utmost respect, but it's not like it's going to be easy for, we haven't seen a ton from Keldon's highlights in his career of him contorting himself around people and like making passes, at the rim. And maybe that's something that's never going to be like completely in his game, but I think Keldon, with the attention he does draw when he drives to the rim, I think he can be more aware, and make more extra passes. I think that's something that he does have in his ability. Um, the other thing, and this ties into what you said, I said adding, just a little bit more of a midi game that ties into what you said about the in between stuff. Maybe that's something else that's just never really necessarily going to be there. But if he can add like just a little move here or there, like I think he can do that.
Mhm.
That can just create some open shots for him in the in between game. That would do a ton to open up the rest of his offensive game. But the last thing, being more consistent on threes. We've seen times when Keldon Johnson has shot like 45+% 2 years ago to open the season. And then
Mhm.
we've seen it fall off. But consistently throughout that time, it's always at least been in the 30s. So it's never been like completely terrible. Um, so I mean, man, it's just like I don't want to just go back to one instance of his career, but I can't say that I haven't seen the potential for him to be a catch and shoot guy at the same time. You know what I mean? Even if it hasn't been consistent, we have seen him do that at times. Granted, the situation was different, but still, playing next to Victor with his role on this team, he's got to be a better catch and shoot, consistent 3-point shooter. That's really my main criticism.
1,000%. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying too about just moving without the ball. Because if he's going to be moving without the ball, he's going to have to be better at catching and shooting. Um, and then also to emphasize what you said about falling asleep defensively, I think it's that third rotation for him that gets him in trouble. Like he usually makes the first rotation,
Mm-hmm.
but when they make that extra pass, then he's like, like I don't really want to run out to the corner at this point. So just not getting lost. I would agree with that statement for sure.
Yeah, and that's pretty much everything that I had on Keldon. And the other thing that I just want to say, as we've been going through this whole off season talking about these prospects, and
Mhm.
we've said this numerous times on the channel, but we've had a lot of new people come in. So I just want to say this again. Like, we're just trying to have constructive criticism. We're not trying to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, these guys are terrible. They suck. Look at how much we know and how much we're going to sit here and talk about how we're the all knowers. And we're gonna determine. We know, Ethan, like and
Yeah.
it's like we've never even been involved in anything close to like the type of stuff that these guys are involved in at a basketball level. That doesn't mean that people can't have an opinion, but me and Ethan also, I think we always want to strive to be self-aware here.
Mhm. For sure. For I'm aware that I'm 5'7" and have no shot at making a basket or even touching an NBA court. Uh, we're just diehard Spurs fans. We want to talk about the game.
Yes, exactly. We want to talk about the team and we want to talk about the prospects.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, sometimes we just got to talk about how, like, well, especially considering the Spurs have gone 22-60 the past 2 seasons, and now they have arguably the most generational player ever on the roster. We want to fix the deficiencies. That's all we're trying to go to. We want to analyze it in the best way we can.
Absolutely.
I think that's a pretty good way to wrap it up, Ethan, don't you think?
I would say so as well.
All righty, my guy. We appreciate all of y'all being in here today. Thank you guys so much for the support lately. And once again, we will be back next week with a live stream, finally getting the answers that we want about this draft, Ethan. And we will see whether the Spurs make a trade or if we add 2 new Spurs in the top 10, Ethan.
We will have to find out, Jude.
I'm just ready for it to be here, Ethan.
I know. It's been too much just
I know.
talking about possibilities. I need answers.
I'm so glad that this is the last time.
Right, same. Finally, we can stop talking about all these prospects.
Oh my gosh, it's finally done. Me and Ethan are gonna go sing Kumbaya in our backyards right now and like ground with the earth to try to reconnect to reality after this 2-month draft purgatory.
Right. I just want to watch a game at this point.
Oh my gosh. Well, hey, Ethan, July 2nd, Jeremy Sohan versus Lauri Markkanen.
Ooh.
Olympic qualifying trials. And also, oh my gosh, this is a great way to end the episode. Klay Thompson is playing for the Bahamas.
I saw a meme and it was because it's
Eric
Klay
Gordon? Like,
Is he playing?
yes, Eric Gordon's there too. I'm like, I mean, I'm
Holy
sure
crap.
they have Bahamian heritage in their family. That's the only way they get on the team. But still, that was just so random. Like Buddy Hield and DeAndre Ayton, I knew that. But Eric Gordon and Klay Thompson also on the Bahamas. They'll be in the pre-qualifying tournament. I think they might be in the same pool as Greece. So you might get some Giannis versus Eric Gordon, Klay Thompson, Buddy Hield, DeAndre Ayton going on. The point is, Ethan, you said I want some games. The games are coming in the Olympics. They're coming with Summer League. It's going to be great.
I saw a meme just to finish this point off about it was a picture of Ayton, Gordon, Thompson, and Buddy Hield, and it was the washed bros.
Ayton's like 25, right?
I know.
But the thing is, he fits.
Yeah, he does.
Oh, God bless him.
God bless him.
It was a rough year in Portland.
Yeah. Well, us too.
Right. Not as bad, technically.
Technically.
I meant like specifically for Ayton, though. Anyway.
Yes.
Because I'm not even going to go down that road, but he said something before he left Phoenix or something about like how Phoenix was holding him back or something like that.
Right. He's going to be dominating.
Yeah.
Bad.
Follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. If you enjoy content like that, SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, at Ethan_Quintero. Again, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button below. We appreciate you guys. And last thing, we've had some merch sales recently, Ethan. So for those of you guys out there over the past 2 months that have made some purchases, I know y'all are out there. One of y'all is out there who has made it. We truly appreciate it. And if you want to get this Hemisphere merch, you can scan the QR code below. Great way to support the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see y'all at the draft.